In 1989, on paper, the small gardens surrounding Japan's Imperial Palace in central Tokyo was worth more than every piece of real estate in the entire state of California.
Companies were taking out loans using land as collateral just to buy more land, which they then use as collateral for yet another loan. It was a financial machine that seemed to print wealth out of thin air.
This is the story of the largest asset bubble in modern history, and of a Tokyo salaryman named Takeshi Sato, who believed in something the entire nation believed in: that land could never, ever go down in price. In September 1985, finance ministers from 5 major nations met at New York's Plaza Hotel and agreed to weaken the US dollar against other currencies. Within 2 years, the Japanese yen had nearly doubled in value. A stronger yen threatened Japan's export-driven economy. To cushion the blow, the Bank of Japan slashed interest rates and held them at a rock-bottom 2.5% for 27 straight months. Cheap money flooded the economy, and in Japan, there was one asset almost everyone agreed was completely safe: land. It was called Tochi Shinwa, the land myth. Except for a single year in 1975, land prices in Japan had not fallen once since 1955.
In Tokyo lived a bank loan officer named Takeshi Sato. He was 34, married to Yumi, with a young daughter, and the 3 of them rented a small apartment while dreaming of one day owning their own home.
In 1986, Takeshi's own bank began marketing a new kind of loan, a multi-generational mortgage that can be repaid over as long as 100 years, spanning the debt across 2 or 3 generations of a family. Encouraged by ever-rising land prices, Takeshi signed one to buy a small condo in the Tokyo suburbs. Between 1985 and 1991, commercial land prices in Tokyo's central wards climbed by roughly 300%. Residential land wasn't far behind. At a company dinner, Takeshi listened as colleagues bragged about buying second properties purely as investments, and about golf club memberships that at the peak of the bubble sold for as much as $3 million, treated less like a hobby and more like a stock. Takeshi's own condo doubled in paper value within 2 years. Using that rising value as collateral, he took out another loan to buy a small second property to rent out, following the same belief everyone around him repeated: land is always safe. On the last trading day of 1989, the Nikkei 225 stock index closed at an all-time high of nearly 39,000 points. Newspapers calculated that the ground beneath the Imperial Palace, on paper, was worth more than the entire state of California, and that the whole Japanese property market was valued at 4 times that of the United States, despite Japan being roughly the size of California alone. At Takeshi's bank, loans were being approved almost automatically, as long as land was used as collateral. The value of the land itself seemed to be the only guarantee anyone needed anymore. Concerned about runaway speculation, the incoming governor of the Bank of Japan, Yasushi Mino, began raising interest rates aggressively, pushing the official rate from 2.5% towards 6% within about a year. The Nikkei began sliding almost immediately, falling from nearly 39,000 points to under 24,000 within a single year, a drop of almost 40%. Land prices, slower to react, began to stall in Tokyo. Then, for the first time in over 3 decades, started edging downward. By the early 1990s, the collapse was undeniable. Urban land prices across Japan fell year after year, eventually dropping by roughly 80% in the hardest hit areas over the following decade. Takeshi's second property bought with a loan secured against paper gains that no longer existed was now worth far less than what he owed on it. He was trapped in what would later be called an underwater mortgage. His own bank, like hundreds of others across Japan, was left holding mountains of loans secured by land no longer worth what had been promised. Non-performing loans that would haunt Japan's banking system for over a decade. Businesses that had borrowed heavily against inflated land values collapsed under their own debt. So-called zombie banks, too weak to lend but too big to fail, kept struggling companies alive without ever truly letting the economy recover. Takeshi kept his job, but salaries froze and promotions stalled. For years, he quietly worked simply to pay down debt on an apartment and a rental property that were both worth less than what he owed. What was supposed to be a brief downturn stretched into what the world would later call Japan's lost decade, a period of stagnation that, in truth, lasted closer to 20 years, if not longer. Years later, Takeshi finally paid off his debts. He never bought a second property again, and he made sure to warn his own daughter, now grown, never to confuse "everyone believes this" with "this is true." "We didn't believe land was valuable," he told her. "We believed land could never go down." Those are two very different beliefs, and only one of them turned out to be a fact. Takeshi's story exposes one of the most dangerous phrases in finance. This asset can only go up, whether it was applied to land in 1980s Japan, tech stocks in 2000, U.S. housing in 2008, or any hyped asset making headlines today. It also reveals what economists call a feedback loop. Rising prices justify more borrowing. More borrowing pushes prices higher still, and the entire system becomes dependent on prices continuing to rise forever, until they don't. The most sobering fact of all, Japan's Nikkei 225 index did not return to its December 1989 peak until February 2024, 34 years later. Some forms of financial damage take not years, but generations to heal. The lesson isn't that real estate or stocks are inherently dangerous. It's that no asset, no matter how safe, how limited in supply, or how many people insist it can only rise, is immune to the basic law of markets. What goes up because of belief alone can come down the very same way. Today, Tokyo's Imperial Palace grounds are once again simply a beautiful park, no longer priced as if they were worth an entire American state, just valued for what they've always truly been. What modern asset do you think might be resting on a myth of its own? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories from economic history.